Welcome everyone to the Wake Up Call channel. If you haven't heard, the Church of England is going to stop using the word church. Of course, this is to sound more relevant, but what this really is to show you that the church, these churches around the earth that are 501c3 churches or just the Church of England itself, these churches belong to the state. Once they become tax exempt, once they declare themselves something like the Church of England, they belong to the state. And they're telling you this through the wording of what exactly they're doing, because they're telling you they don't want to any longer use the word church because, well, church scares people away. The term church isn't modern enough. And they want to use words like community. And of course, if you haven't been paying attention, everything that's going on from woke to DEI to squatters being allowed to exist all of a sudden in today's society, that people could literally just go on someone's property and declare it theirs. This is all communism. And global communism is the New World Order. So the Church of England is set for a rebrand as it's dropping the word church. Well, this is important because the word church actually does matter. The word church mentioned in Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, which is a verse that everybody out there should know, right? And I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So for people out there that are wondering, they keep using this term community and they brainwash people with this word community. But if you look at the spelling of the word community, C-O-M-M-U-N-I-T-Y, it's very similar to that word C-O-M-M-U-N-I-S-M, because communism is community. And remember, this isn't just about the state having control over the church. This is about the state having control over everything, including your family, using terminology like community. Let me just play for you these clips for anyone out there that's new that hasn't seen MSNBC, Kamala Harris. They've been, kind of subliminally inserting the word community when it comes to your own children. How your children don't belong to you. They're not your property. You can't raise them the way that you want to raise them. The community will raise them, right? That's communism.
You know, when we talk about our children, I know for this group, we all believe that when we talk about the children of the community, they are the children of the community.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
So, of course, it's not just the church, it's your children as well. It's everything because communism is community. So the story is that the Church of England is apparently dropping the word church in the hopes of drawing in more crowds. Again, that's just straight up propaganda. That just gives them reason to drop the term church. How about if the church wants to draw in crowds, which of course they don't want to do, which is why all the churches look and sound the same. Because I've talked about the evangelical movement, how a lot of these guys were government assets who look the same, talk the same. This is like this is a basic form of mind control to mold people into looking and acting and talking and dressing the same way. So if you looked at somebody, one of these preachers from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right, with their sweater, this was done by design. This scared people away from the church. It made people cringe at the church. A lot of the stories out there about some of these preachers, like Jim Baker or Tammy Faye Baker, these stories that they've glorified out in the open to make Christians look like hypocrites. And of course, the church always looks and sounds the same. They've modernized this now with the way that you see the church in the year 2024, right? A lot of the churches now it's almost like going to a concert, right? You see all these churches like Hillsong, for example, perfect example of what they've done to the church. They make it where they all act this certain way and they go there and to them praise is listening to some really just a song that is really more of a mainstream produced song that's supposed to be about praise. Now, I'm not criticizing any of you out there who might like to get You're spirit-filled in that way. It's not my place to judge, but what I'm telling you is that this is a formulated thing, right? The state has taken control already of the church, which is why it all looks and sounds the same. So they're not coming out and saying, well, we want to do this because we want to draw people in. They're doing it because they're out in the open telling you that they're destroying the church. They're destroying the church by turning it into community. And everybody knows and should know. If you don't know, now you know. Community is communism, which means it's state-run and state-controlled. And anytime a church becomes a 501c3, they're giving themselves up to the state. They're selling themselves out so that they could be quote-unquote tax exempt. So the study called New Things, a theological investigation into the work of starting new churches across 11 dioceses in the Church of England, was conducted by the Center for Church Planting, Theology, and Research in Durham. And I can go into the ins and outs of the articles, but it's just boring. That's what it is. So they like to use, quotes like this. The term church is not used in favor of other terms like community or congregation. It's worthy of theological reflection. We explore whether the question, what is church, is worth asking. And that's how they start brainwashing people, because they start saying, well, church is community, because they've created the term community without anyone out there realizing what it is. And then they've ingrained it in people's heads that community is this nice thing where flowers grow, right? Remember some of the other videos I've done in the past, community gardens. They use the term community because it means sharing. It means sharing your kids, it means sharing your home, sharing your everything. And they make you think that this is something to do with being kind, that this is some type of Christian gesture, right? Well, you're a Christian. You should want to share your garden with people. Well, you shouldn't be forced into sharing any of your stuff, any of your property with anyone else. If you would like to give somebody an apple from your garden, that's up to you. But the whole mindset of, well, you've spent your whole life growing a garden, knowing the New World Order was coming. And then, of course, all these other people who have enabled the New World Order around you have tried to silence you. They've tried to tell you that you're crazy. Then when it all comes, they expect you to share your garden with them. And they expect your garden to then become their garden. And I use that garden theme because that's the whole theme of this whole New World Order, right? They're trying to take everything and all private property and abolish it and turn it into sharing. So the church itself, by taking the terminology of church and turning it into community, they're pretty much waving a flag saying that this is state run. This is state control. But the sheeple out there will hear that and they'll say, well, church is like a community, because they've heard that over and over and over and over again. They become desensitized to what even community means. So they think that it just means being a nice person, that you live in a community, that everyone in the community is pitching in and chipping in together. Everyone in the community has everybody's best interests at heart. This is all basic mind control, right? And just like I've talked about, all we hear them doing is using terminology like woke, right? Woke and community. Oh, this woke crap, this woke crap. We'll call it what it really is. It's communism. It's a fancy new age term so that people, when they hear the word communism, they immediately think of these old regimes that were dangerous, that were wicked. Communism is the enemy of humanity. That's what it really is. It's the enemy of humanity. And they're brainwashing people into wanting to be woke and then telling them that they're victims. And, well, if you go forward with wokeism and wokeism ideologies, that it benefits them, right? Because the system has betrayed them. The system has gone against them. And then they'll realize once everything is in place that woke is communism and that communism is the enemy of humanity. It's state-run everything. It's state-controlled everything. And then when you have the technology in place, which it's in place, now it's just a matter of consent and people going along with it. You empower the government more than ever before, which is why I keep talking about disengaging, why it's so important to disengage. People go, well, we got to do more than just disengage. Could you imagine if millions of people disengage, they stop participating in this? By engaging in this, you continue to empower them, right? By going to churches that are 501c3 tax-exempt churches, you're really empowering. You're not empowering the church. You're not giving the church. You're giving it to the state. Because those preachers, maybe they did it without realizing what they were doing by becoming one, saying, hey, it's hard enough to run a church. I don't want to pay my taxes, or I can't afford to pay my taxes. I won't be able to live if I do both. So I'll become 501c3. And then the state comes in and they go, well, to be 501c3, you need to meet these qualifications. And one of which, of course, is you need to support the synagogue of Satan. the enemy of God, you need to support, and you need to preach that they're God's chosen people, and you need to do this and you need to do that. And these people succumb to it and they give into it, all because they want to be tax exempt, all because of money. And that's the truth of the matter, right? So for any church out there that's going along with this and starting to use words like community, people need to wake up to what community means, because eventually community means that everything that you see going on in the world that you hate, right? How many people out there see all this stuff with squatters and they go, this is ridiculous, right? Some people are like, oh yeah, okay, well, the squatters. And, and when it happens to you, how would you respond to that? How would you respond if you were on vacation for 3 months? Say you went on a cross-country trip, you had an RV, and you come home and someone's living in your home. Someone's living in there because they decided that, well, you took some of your things out of the home to put in the RV for your road trip, and your small home now looks like an empty home, and they've decided to take residency in your home. And then the state goes, yeah, well, these are squatter rules. I mean, how we've gotten to this point where we've allowed the state to do these things and then convince people that, well, it's nothing wrong with squatting. Well, this guy's just looking for a place to live. And then you got a guy in your home who's just doing crack, and we're supposed to feel bad for that person and allow them to stay in our home because the state protects them and doesn't protect us, right? So everything going on that's wicked, of course, comes down from the state. Most people should already know that. But when you start seeing the church bow down to this stuff, when you start seeing the church actually do things, like, I'm not a big person on terminology. Like if people say, well, where does the Bible say that we're actually Christians? I'm a follower of Christ. I'm on board with that. You don't need to use the terminology Christian. You could say that you're just a disciple of Christ, a follower of Christ. I often say that. I go between the two. But when it comes to a church, okay, the church is a very important term. I mean, it's biblical, the term church, right? The church itself is built on Peter, the rock, right? Again, Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. And I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Well, by changing the name church and calling it community, these churches are blasphemy. Really, they're opening the gates of hell to prevail against the church by changing the terminology. And you could sit there and you can go, well, that's a little bit too far. I mean, it's just a word. It's just a word. Well, it's a word. God built the church upon the rock of Peter, right? This word has meaning. It has scriptural meaning, spiritual meaning. And for them to use the word community, of all words, of all the words out there. And again, if you're not somebody who understands how this stuff works, I hope you understand now that the word community literally means communism. That's what community is. It's a way that they've shaded people away from the term communism because they know that they'd be scared. They would probably push back. They go, wait a minute. All the people in America fought against communism for so long. Why are we accepting it all of a sudden? Well, you're under hypnosis, because now what they're doing is they're changing the terminology to get you on board, and they're guilting you into it. Well, you got to be a nice person. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to do what the state says, in other words. And the state says that the 501c3 churches or the Church of England, I mean, this is going to spread. The state is the one who's telling them, well, we're going to change it to community, not the church itself. And they're just towing the company line. Oh, all right, well, we'll change it. Let's modernize it because more people will show up. Well, actually, if you stop acting like the formulated churches act, more people will want to attend the church. In fact, I don't consider this a ministry. I don't consider myself a minister. I really don't. I truly don't. What I do is I see these things. I think about kids out there. I think about people out there that are misguided. I try to show you the wicked side of things. I show you the wicked side so that you can see how real God is. Because when you see a lot of this stuff, you go, oh my goodness, this really is spiritual war. All these people that we look at who say they're atheists, who say they don't believe in God, they're constantly talking about God and the devil. And it looks like they're making the devil appear to be the good guy and God to be the villain. And people are seeing that more now with Hollywood and how they present themselves. But I'm not saying that you need to do what I do, to get the message out, or, everybody can find God in different ways, right? I try to do this that way in hopes that people will pick up a Bible and find God. That's why I've done this the way that I've done it for a long period of time and continue to do it that way. But if they're saying, well, not many people are coming through the front door, that's because they're specifically designing the church and making the church look very monotone, very hypocritical. This is all done through the media. This is all done through Hollywood. This is what they do. So they obviously don't want the youth out there to find God, and they do everything they can to make sure that that doesn't happen. That's why they glorify all these Satanists and put them in the YouTube trending and the Twitter trending, and they make these people famous who constantly go against God's word. And the church itself fights back by remaining the same, right? By continuing to be monotone, by continuing to toe the company line, the state line. So the church how about the churches come out and they start going, hey, you know what? The government is very wicked. The government clearly is going along with all these satanic agendas. What do you see instead? You see the church getting in bed with the LGBT. You see the church agreeing with Planned Parenthood in some cases. That's how insane this has gotten. And that's because, again, once the state and the church get in bed with each other, even though we've all been told, well, church and state separate the two, right? That's what we've always been told, separate church and state. Well, guess what? Any of these churches that become, 501c3s or the Church of England, they're run by the state, which is why you see them continue to act cookie cutter. That's why you don't see revolutions or you don't see Christians, banding together against the wicked. You just see Christians what? They continue to break Christians down in a sense, right? They continue to, denomination of Christianity, that denomination of Christianity. Oh, are you Christian? Do you believe we're preaching? And they continue to just filter them all the way down, where they continue to break Christians up and have them infighting among each other based on a lot of different things. Instead of just reading the Bible, right? Read the Bible verbatim. That's all you got to do. Read the Bible verbatim. God gave us the Bible. This isn't that complicated. Stop the infighting. You could interpret some things differently than somebody else. You don't need to fight over it. That's going to end up being between you and God, right? I mean, if somebody out there is looking at the Bible and then they're going, well, I don't agree with this part of, well, you're going to have to tell God that you don't agree with it, right? I mean, it's pretty ironclad. You follow the Bible. God gave us the Bible. You don't even need a church to be able to interpret the Bible. Some people like the church for fellowship. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But they break us down in all these different denominations and continue to keep us divided. And you're seeing it now more than ever because you see the church getting involved in a lot of these things that they shouldn't even be involved in. Like I said, the LGBT stuff, right? They're having trans readers at some of these churches. I mean, it's absurd that it's happening. And what's even more absurd is that people will continue to attend any of these churches because they should be able to take God's word and go, look, I don't even need to go to this place. I know God's against this. I'm not for it then. If God's against it, I am not for it. I'm against it too, right? Because that's what God tells us to do. But they're removing the word church. This has been going on, the whispers of this in the UK for a year or so now. And now all these articles just started coming out again about changing the terminology to community. And I used that clip from MSNBC where they talk about your kids belonging to the community because it's an important clip to see. Because people out there, when they hear that clip, I can't believe they had the audacity to air that on national television. When people hear that, they go, whoa, whoa. Even libs hear that and they go, that's a bit much, right? Because most Democrats out there don't even realize that they're supporting communism. They look at the other side and they go, they're big, bad bullies. Donald Trump's a bully. I'll vote whoever the Democrat. And they don't even realize, wait a minute, do you realize what they're actually doing? They say one side's trying to remove rights when they're really removing rights, but really it's both sides working together to remove our rights. But the one side, the Democratic side, is openly talking about sharing your kids with the community, which means, people hear that and they're like, I don't even know what that means. It means if you're a Christian and you're raising your child on the Bible, well, the community could decide. So if you don't want your kid to have anything to do with the LGBT or something along those lines, any of the woke crap, well, guess what? Your neighbor might disagree and say, well, you shouldn't shelter them from it. Let me teach them about the LGBT. Let me teach them about utter insanity. Let me teach them all this stuff. And say, no, I don't want my kid to grow up. But they'll say, well, it's a community child here. Your child deserves to hear this other stuff, and then let your child decide. So let's let your child be influenced by us. We'll dress up like clowns and we'll parade around so your 2-year-old seems intrigued because they don't know what in the world we're doing. We're acting insane. And then maybe they'll want to dress up too because it seems like it's fun. And then, we could corrupt and pollute your child, right? Community. All comes in the name of community. And by it all comes in the name of community, I mean communism. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.